Let's face it, the past few years have been an unprecedented mess. The weight of continuous, heavy issues, burnout, fatigue, confusion, stagnance. Sound familiar? What I decided to do was to have meaningful conversations with women I admire. It's the women in my life and yours that continue to thrive through whatever it is that life throws at them. I want to know, how are they doing it? How are they getting there? And how can I glean a little bit of their wisdom? This is that. And that's what she said.
I am so happy to be talking to DJ Pohl today. DJ, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, hey, so why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? You're from Chilliwack originally, right?
Yes. Well, actually, I was born in Ontario.
Okay.
My family moved out here when I was 3 years old. So I've been in Chilliwack for 33 plus years now.
Okay.
Do the math on how old I am there. But yeah, so pretty much raised here, but technically born in Ontario.
Okay. So yeah, and I mean, when I think about you, I think about DJ Pohl, I think about Chilliwack's political strategist extraordinaire.
Yeah.
Because when we met, one of the first things that we worked on together was my political campaign.
Yes.
We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I want to ask you, were you always really interested in the political scene? Is that...
No, absolutely not. In fact, in university, in my Bachelor of Arts degree program, I took some political science courses and they terrified me.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I found them very challenging. I, wasn't all that connected to politics, aware of it. But so the path and the journey that led me to this, that kind of political action and engagement in the community is a very interesting one. And that journey is the really important piece as to like why it's so engaging and important to me now.
Yeah, right.
But that leading up to kind of determining, really having that impact on a community and how to have that impact, and kind of realizing that, politics is a channel for that, even if you didn't necessarily align with politics or certain pieces of politics. It's a challenging thing for sure, but I definitely, wasn't really raised in a super political household. Through university and high school, like not interested.
Not so much.
Some of that kind of came through some of my schooling and the labor movement, and these are all very different aspects that kind of led me on this path, and just continuing to do what I feel is
what
right.
works for you.
Yeah.
So you went to high school here in Chilliwack.
Yes.
You graduated from CSS.
Started secondary.
Started secondary,
Yeah.
right on. And then
Yeah.
you went to Simon Fraser. Is that where you went to?
University of Fraser Valley.
Oh, UFV, right on,
Yes.
right on.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And what was your initial course of study?
It's a good question. My initial course of study or interest really was to play soccer at university.
Oh, cool. Okay.
School was kind of secondary. I started off in the science department, actually.
Did you?
I did biology and chemistry, some astronomy. I was just trying to figure it out, and nothing seemed to really fit. I did psychology, business, kinesiology. I was all over the map, really.
I love that. I love that because it probably gave you a suite of
It did.
experiences and
Yes,
different topics.
yeah.
So what happened next after you're doing all this?
Yeah, and I ended up settling on criminal justice.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And, for very different reasons to begin with than by the time when I graduated. Very different reasons as to like why I stuck with it and really cared about it as a area of field of academics and professions. But
Okay, so when you started criminology, what was your initial draw? What was the thing that drew you to it?
I was kind of like, I can make sense of this. We've got the criminal code, especially like criminal law aspect of it. It was like, it's written down. It is, black and white. We can follow this. Like there's the court system that you can make sense of. And very quickly kind of realized that it's not so cut and dry.
There's this great framework, but then there's people.
Yes, yeah. So initially I was kind of like, okay, this makes sense to me. It's like the philosophy kind of behind, criminal law in general and the whole like social contract and how we got to have like rule of law. I found very, very interesting.
Cool.
And then, by the end, just really engaged in the program in the field of studies because it is, again, an interesting way to have an impact on a community and address harm and conflict that will occur everywhere, whether that be criminal or not. And then how do we address that and what does that look like? Initially I felt attracted to it for a very like kind of, crime and punishment type of feel. But by the end had like the development of these just like restorative values and principles that were there, but just got pulled out through my studies somehow.
I love how DJ sees the world through this lens of community action. She almost prefaces things she says with her thoughts of, but how does this apply to my community? But how does this actually look on the ground? How does this actually affect change for people? And sitting down with her and having this conversation, it just became so apparent to me how dedicated she is to, whatever topic I'm going to study, it has to be a topic that really works in the context of making changes to communities. I just love how she approaches things in that way.
Yeah, those nuances of how we can put a living, breathing, soulful act of humanity on top of a very clear framework. Is that sort of what you mean?
Well, yeah. And again, that, clear framework is a colonial structure, imposed upon the first people here, ultimately built by white men for white men. And
great point.
The impact that has had through the criminal justice system and on communities in general and disproportionately impacting especially Indigenous people is something very interesting, and which leads me to criminal justice reform. I think is a really interesting piece of heavy, large work that needs to be done and looked at to start to truly dismantle those colonial structures and systems that are in place.
But how do you really feel, DJ? I just love it. She is so clear about her approach. She just comes right out and just nails it right on the head. It is these, systems like this that are only working for a particular demographic, by whom the system was created and for whom. And she is actually just coming right in and saying, you know what? No, this is not working in my vision of community and of criminal justice for the entire public. She's really just, pulling no punches here. Love DJ's approach.
I feel very engaged in that. It started while still finishing my degree, and I've been working in the criminal justice system now for almost 15 years. And
talk a little bit about your position within the criminal justice system.
Yeah, so
interesting.
I started with the Chilliwack Crown Council office before finishing my degree, so in about 2008. Started as a receptionist there and then became a legal assistant. And then I was doing major trial legal assistant work. And at this point, I'm now a growth paralegal. So cool. I'm a paralegal, but I'm completing my certification to officially be a paralegal for the BC Prosecution Service. So
a common theme through these interviews on what she said, these women are always learning.
Wow. So all of these different positions you've had, as well as the different aspects of schooling you've done, are really all in this landscape of criminal justice, the colonial aspects of it, but then how that might be reformed in future?
Yeah, I mean, if you really boil it down, justice is at the heart of this, and injustice, fairness, equality, led to all kinds of other things. Working for the prosecution service, so that's direct government, provincial government, made me a member of the union, BCGEU.
Yes. Okay.
Right. So you said these other positions, like I have a number of elected positions within the union and the labor movement. And again, like that just kind of built upon, working professionally in the criminal justice system is challenging because you see a lot of these negative impacts, and it's important. It's very essential and important work, but it's also hard and challenging and not hard to see. And then learning about the union and the labor movement again was, improving work sites for everyone who works there and injustices against working people and members. So again, it boiled down to this aspect of justice and fairness and equality, and those two things have built upon each other and supplemented each other in my growth as a human and how I'm able to contribute to my colleagues and my community. And it's been quite an adventure with lots of learning, and
so much and much more to come. Yes. I would imagine, because so your involvement with the BC GEU is quite extensive. And when we first met, I know that I was absolutely captivated by your knowledge of process and policy as it related to the labor movement. And I love that you are taking, an approach that comes from multiple sides on this, because that is exactly how, at least I think, how we will kind of get rid of some of those colonial themes.
Yeah.
How do you see ultimately your current position as coming together with some of these labor issues that you're so passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of supplements all together. Yeah. Most recently, I was elected to be the first vice chairperson for the component 12, which is administrative professionals for the BC General Employees Union.
Okay.
So that represents about 13,000 administrative professionals across the province that work in every single ministry, right? Okay. There's always going to be admin professionals in every ministry, completely required and essential for any kind of function of work.
Absolutely.
And it's so important, and we are in every office and every ministry, with administrative type duties that differ vastly. Like we're, the Service BC, front counter in forests, and there were the admin professionals there in Ministry of Children and Families and Social Development Poverty Reduction, like the people working on income assistance, Ministry of Finance, absolutely everywhere. And then courts, like court services, right, and the clerks. And then for the prosecution service, where I am, administrative support to the Crown prosecutors, and what that looks like.
Yeah.
It's interesting to consider the sheer breadth of fields that DJ is talking about here that are members of the BCGEU, but that in her position as being a representative for this many thousands of members across British Columbia, I hadn't really considered what a vast set of, different types of people that requires her to know about. So yeah, I guess that's a really long-winded way of saying, wow, DJ knows a lot of stuff.
And so from the labor perspective, we want to improve working conditions for all working people, but especially highlight some of the issues that are facing administrative professionals.
And what are some of those? I wouldn't know about that, but I'm curious.
COVID-19 is a huge example of something that has impacted all of our work significantly. in terms of health and safety, like occupational health and safety has always been a really important aspect of collective agreements and labor justice and pursuing that. But the COVID-19 pandemic has just magnified some of those issues that already existed. And how do we ensure that every working person remains safe during a pandemic and not in a pandemic? There's been a lot of things. And then at this point, the main kind of issues are transitioning to, we're not out of the pandemic, so it's not a post-pandemic world, but things like, telework agreements and flexibility working from home, which, wasn't happening before the pandemic. And how does that impact our work, our health and safety? What does that look like? But then, the context of everything that's going on in the province and across the country, affordability is such a huge issue facing everyone, but working people as well, right? Discussions we're at the bargaining table right now. Cost of living adjustment is,
it's a huge
issue number
consideration.
Yes.
And what is I know that you can't talk too candidly about those kinds of things, but what is the mood like at that table for you right now? Are people, is everybody tired? Is everybody frustrated? Or people recognize how difficult it's been?
It's tricky. It's hard to say exactly. I mean, I know certainly within the labor movement, that recognition of the impact on not just affordability in day-to-day life, but mental health and balancing family and, people trying to remain or get into a housing market or even find stable rental homes, commuting to work with gas prices. There's the issues are so intense and magnified at this point that, amongst the membership and my colleagues, it's, there's a desire to, fight for what we deserve.
Absolutely. And I love that you said desire. It's there's so much to be unpacked there in terms of what is expected, what is desired, what is owed, what is fair. How do you, as someone who is, at the helm of a lot of these processes in terms of bargaining and talking to all of your many thousands of members, how do you even begin to approach something like that? I get overwhelmed even asking the question, DJ. So tell me just, what's your process like?
It can be overwhelming for sure, because you want to make sure that every single union member is informed and engaged and knows where to find the information, and is being communicated to in a productive and positive way that works for everyone. So one type of communication is not going to work for everyone. So how do we make sure that everyone is ultimately, at the end of the day, it's empowering our members to know what their rights are, know how to look it up, where to find the information, and what to do about it if something has been violated or something isn't right. And supporting and empowering members to address those issues at the worksite level and build up from there. I think BCGU in general is, I'm biased because I've been in this union for 15 years now, but I think we're doing a really great job just building our membership up from that basic empowerment level. Now, that's not to say there's not room for improvement, because there always is, but we're experiencing a aging workforce. There's lots of retirements. A lot of our membership is new or newer, and especially in administrative professional positions, they're sometimes entry-level positions, so you'll see a lot of turnover and change. So it's how are we reaching all of all of our members, where they are.
And they may need different messages. They may need their messages in different translations of a similar
geography
protocol.
Plays a huge role in that. Like in really condensed areas like the Lower Mainland and Victoria. You can, communicate to a large amount of people geographically quickly, but in other parts of the province, that's really, really difficult.
There's
absolutely. Lots of communities that don't even have, stable internet. So, that communication is huge, and it's, the pandemic has brought some kind of technology opportunities in that as well, but also challenges. Like that face-to-face interaction is always the best way to communicate and like build a rapport and just have a conversation with someone. But in absence of that, how do we best communicate to all of our members? It's challenging, and technology can help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over and above the immense amount of work that this would clearly take to ensure that your communications are reaching your very, very diverse set of members. I love DJ's dedication to finding out what everybody needs, regardless of, if you are in the main office downtown or if you are somewhere way out in the boonies. I like how that is part of her thought process. It's certainly something that I would want as a member of one of these unions.
And I mean, I think another of the characteristics of you that I admire so much is your enthusiasm towards it and your sort of tireless dedication to reaching all of the members that are within the BCGEU, because that diversity is so immense. And what I see and what I've seen you doing in the past several years that I've known you is really stretching your muscles to reach as many folks as you can that are doing this work on the ground, that are essentially making sure that things are running. Where do you get that drive from? Like, where does that come from? Is it internal? Do you wake up every day and give yourself a pep talk in the mirror? How does that go?
Well, yeah, not huge on pep talks, I don't think, but I feel fulfilled by like having an impact and making an impact and just creating space for people to be engaged in the community. It's what I care about, and just that kind of passion for fairness and equality drives me, and it can be a challenge sometimes in terms of balance and making sure you're not doing too much, and knowing when maybe it's best to not participate and allow for someone else. Like that piece of creating that space in a really productive way that's in the best interest of everyone in our community and what we're doing. So I can't really say like where that total drive comes from, but working on things like that just brings me kind of that fulfillment professionally and also in the community that I feel is important to me.
She's fulfilled by making fulfilling opportunities and spaces for others. I love that. And she's dedicated to making sure that her life affords her the opportunity to do that.
Wow. And I just love how there are so many pieces to that. And I mean, a piece that we really want to talk about, that I really want to talk about, is your most recent run for politics as our MP here for Chilliwack. So we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about that, among many other things, with the amazing DJ Pohl. We are back with DJ Pohl, and as promised, I really want to talk about your jump into the political pool. But I am going to ask you a couple things first before that. You've always been such a big part of the labor movement. Did that jumpstart your political career at all? Like being involved with so much of that policy and so many different needs of people working on the ground. Is that what ultimately jumpstarted your interest?
Well, I think it certainly led to it.
Okay.
For sure.
What led you to that?
Yeah. I mean, first getting involved in the labor movement for me was, I was working in direct government. I wasn't raised in a labor family where, we talked about politics or that type of stuff much. And I really, honestly, I didn't know what being in a union even meant. I didn't know. And I was just kind of finishing my degree at that point and was like, well, you might as well keep learning about things. And
am I the only one who is astonished that DJ did not grow up in a very politically charged household? Like, what? How can you be so passionate about these things and just haven't come from it? Her parents must be like, where did that come from?
My specific work site did not have a steward, so I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll put my hand up to learn about this and maybe I can help things here. And I don't know anything about it. And it really connected again, like why I enjoy criminal justice is like all of a sudden labor is now this like pursuit of justice for work sites and people at the work sites and working people and communities in general. Diversity and inclusion and making sure no one is left behind, like all of those things kind of came through the labor movement. Yeah. And I remember being at my one of the first conventions I ever went to was a BC Federation of Labor convention, where a resolution opposing the pipeline hit the floor.
Okay.
And
this is the TMX pipeline.
Trans Mountain at that point. This was 2012 I think. Yeah. And I remember the discussion on the floor being interesting.
Oh, do tell.
I mean, within the labor movement, there's always been this, and outside of it as well, like for a long time, the discussion and the narrative was jobs versus the environment. And when we're talking about specific projects that people work on and are employed by, it is so often an attack on that person's livelihood, right? And
valid. Yeah.
I think that particular resolution failing for something that was very important to me and felt, really scary.
Okay, so can you just outline what failed and why was it scary?
Well, so the resolution itself was to oppose the pipeline. Yes. And it failed. So
they wanted the pipeline.
Yeah, so the majority of members voted to defeat that resolution.
Got it.
And that was
hard
like,
for you.
Okay, I think that it engaged me in the labor movement through also connecting some of like the environmental justice that I just felt like was important to me and I was working on in the community. And that led to like an additional path within the union and the labor movement to get involved on environmental committees and try to just work on that narrative and bringing folks together who are potentially going to be impacted and have their work impacted by transitioning to like a cleaner green economy and what does that look like and how do we engage in that and talk to union members and working people about it. And
okay, this is so cool. She observes something, this resolution failing or passing or whatever it was. But the bottom line was that it was a yes, we want the pipeline. And she didn't go to her immediate reaction at all, which was disappointment, right? She instead went back to how does this impact community? How can I understand where these people are coming from? What can I do to be more proactive so that we can, as a community, all get on the same page and be informed and be sensitive to each other's needs and needs, yes, but also just realities maybe would be a good way to say that. So I just love how she, just puts herself to work, figuring out, it's not the direct thing. It's like, which steps do I need to take so that I can come at this problem from a new way so that I can help to be part of the solution. Ugh, so cool.
What can we as a union even do in terms of buildings, infrastructure, to reduce emissions ourselves? And
True.
So it all was very supplementary. And at this point, I've been sitting on the Climate Solutions Advisory Council to the Premier for a third term,
Nice.
which is really interesting and very challenging. Lots of different voices from academia, economics, NGOs, and labor and youth and Indigenous First Nations communities. And it's challenging conversations for sure, but that opportunity for accountability on, we've now set emissions targets.
Yeah.
And how are we going to get there? And what's the accountability for how are we doing, where the gaps are? I see it as a big opportunity for that. Very challenging.
And I love the point that you bring up about this obviously we are in a climate crisis, but we also have people that need to have jobs, that need to feed their families. Yes. And I love that you're coming from a place of understanding that, whilst at the same time understanding the emergency that we are facing. That is so hard.
Workers need to be at the table talking about things that impact them. It's it seems quite simple, but it never is that simple, but oftentimes, the workers have some of the best ideas on what needs to be done or how, and like how to get to that place, and how we can do that in a way that doesn't leave anyone behind.
Exactly, because a job, if you have a great union job, say in oil and gas, there has to be some kind of safeguard for your livelihood.
You deserve to have a sustainable career in an industry that is sustainable. It's very important, right? And just making sure that all those voices that need to be at the table is really important.
For me, this is philosophically a really important point. This point that there can't really be, enemies of clean energy, so to speak. There are a lot of Canadians and people in the world, in all countries too, that work in fossil fuel-based industry that, have their jobs there. And so I really appreciate the point of, not just paying that a bit of lip service, but actually understanding that there needs to be a framework and a systemic solution that comes into that framework so that those people don't feel abandoned. And I guess maybe some of what we've seen with some of the pipeline protests, not the pipeline protests, the really angry protests, we've seen a lot of those in Ottawa. I mean, I wonder if some of that is born out of feeling left behind, feeling terrified of what the heck, how are we going to protect our infrastructure and families in the future?
Because these things compound on top of each other. Climate change and its impacts, affordability and its impacts are disproportionately impacting certain communities and populations, women. We need to make sure that we're it's not one size fits all solution to the problem here. When we're working on these solutions, it needs to have that understanding that there is a disproportionate impact.
Absolutely. And I love how you are so very, very well versed in the sort of top down the bottom up approaches, and how it can't be one or the other. It has to actually be both of those. So did your passion around these huge problems, I guess you could say, ignite your desire to run for an MP? Because, just jumping right in there as a run for the federal position, that's a big deal. And let me tell you, I admire you so much for that. Can you tell me a little bit about how that came up for you?
Yeah. I mean, working on these things in the community in like volunteer capacities as well as professionally and academically, kind of embracing politics as an agent of change became a piece of that, a piece I resisted for some time, to be honest.
Really?
It's a hard thing to really. I mean, once you're in, you're in with 2 feet, and I think the important piece of that is not to lose sight of the big picture and like the best interests of the community, and because politics can be very all-encompassing and overwhelming in just the politics of the politics.
Sure,
right?
can. That's well said.
And so I did resist it for some time, and ultimately, like, it comes down to that question of how do we best have the greatest impact and make the change that we're looking for in our communities, at our work sites, in terms of policies, affordability, the law. And politics is that avenue. Are the political structures perfect? No, not even close. Absolutely not. But deciding that I can potentially contribute in a way that has some positive change on that was a hard decision for me to make, but exciting nonetheless. And, that ultimately kind of led to that decision to decide to run. And I've always really enjoyed the kind of background work of supporting really fantastic people like yourself to be that voice and like be successfully elected and just try to like create that space for that in the background and have productive communication in the community about it. And so that kind of like, managing campaigns and doing that type of work, I really, really enjoy, and I still do. Taking that next step to actually being the candidate myself was a huge deal for me, because I enjoy that so much, and I wouldn't ever want to take away from that work. But ultimately, I think it adds value to some of that work as well, having a specific experience as a candidate, and just offering what I have to contribute through that avenue adds value when I'm asking really good people who should be at the table to step up and run themselves. There's that, so I still enjoy it, but it was an interesting time, right?
It was.
Election, a pandemic, like all these things. It's
many factors.
It's been nonstop, but
and you must have had to have just not only nerves of steel, but just marathon levels of energy. And I mean, this was a tricky campaign. There was it was the pandemic still. There was a lot going on. Mm-hmm. How did your, immense knowledge of running a political campaign help you during that run? I mean, it helped for sure, but you can never really fully prepare for doing that and being that candidate until you're doing it. Yeah. It's really telling as to whether that is something you enjoy or, because the campaign itself is different than actually the elected position, right? It's another beast. And it's funny that you say that because it is literally a completely other thing. Yeah, I didn't know that.
But at the same time, those 18-hour plus days of a campaign where you are singularly focused on this task and you're just going that whole time. I've, reflecting upon it now, I'm like, I kind of miss those 18 hours. And
it's
I was
exciting, right?
I maybe shouldn't miss those. That's maybe an indication that I'm really busy, which I'm sure that it is, but that singular focus on this task and just engaging with people in the community and having those fantastic conversations is really exciting, and I think productive for the community. Like I'm left feeling really positive after putting my name forward, and it was exciting.
It was so exciting, and I think one of the reasons why I found it so exciting is because, yes, I mean, if you don't know this based on what she's already said, you ran my campaign for the school board, and in fact, you actually were the one who was like, how about, hey, you, you might be good for this. So, I mean, the reason, that I have such a huge admiration for what you do is because I see you seeing the whole picture. And I see you working on politics as, as a strategist, yes, but as someone who's on the front lines in your job and on the front lines as you're working with the BCGEU. And then I saw you on the front lines as a candidate. So, okay, let me ask you this. Do you have a favorite role, a preferred role? What's your happy place, or are they all your happy place?
That's hard. But I think, when you say that, I can't take credit for, you being elected or you even being, selected as a person to run. Like, this was a very much community, grassroots efforts. And one of my favorite things is, a skill set I feel like I have is bringing people together to drive consensus-based decision-making processes that create space for equality of voices and people to be heard, and then connect and work collectively together for a common purpose that is just going to improve the community. So that's definitely one of my favorite things. Yeah. And it's a skill I have to contribute, but having you successfully elected and some of the other campaigns that I've managed or worked on or been a part of, none of that was, my specific role or something that I can take credit for at all. It's all been such a collective effort of really amazing people doing great work in the community and coming together and contributing what they have. And that's going to be something different for everyone. Yeah. And also builds a community because you're supporting each other in that, you're learning from people in that. And I really enjoy that. And I think that it's really important to create that space to celebrate those successes together as a community and not even just as individual successes. I was that person as a candidate, offering an alternative to the status quo in a way that I felt I had something to contribute. But
DJ Pohl, she is the team player until the very end. She that is her through and through. She does not waver from that POV because that is literally her POV.
It's not about me. It's about creating that space to
absolutely
make sure no one is left behind and that we're seeing ourselves, our community reflected in the leadership that represents its community. And there's a lot of work to do on that front. I recognize my my privilege as a white woman in that, and commit to making space as best as I can. So we do have reflective leadership of our very diverse community, and it is diverse, and there are great people here with diverse opinions and viewpoints, and what do we do with that, and how do we do it to make sure that our community's moving in a forward positive direction. We're growing so fast that how do we keep up with this? And I loved being a candidate for Chilliwack-Hope. I have a lot of really positive memories and learning opportunities. Still learning from it, from that run. And
will you run again? Do you think? Or
I think that the Chilliwack-Hope.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
for now, if they're changing the borders potentially of the riding. We've always needed people. I think community is so important to this community. Oh, right?
Yeah, good. That's a really good point. Yep.
Being from here and like tuned into the community in various ways is so important that I felt we've needed candidates who are willing to commit to running multiple times in order to have success. That's the only path I see for success. So yes, at this point, I would for sure run again because I saw it as building towards something. Yes. But at the same time, like if that building is for an even more amazing candidate than myself, if that's what's in the best interest of this community, like I support that.
You're great. And here's the thing that I love about your entire sort of persona this way is that every day the work that you're doing is benefiting people. Today, tomorrow, the next day. And I love that you have this outlook that you're working to benefit people no matter what. And I think that's one of the reasons why when you were running, I was just so, your campaign was just so awesome to me because I see you working for everybody in that way, just as you've just described. What did you feel after the campaign was through? What was it like when it was over?
Yeah, well, I didn't have much time to rest.
No, I guess not.
I think I had the day after the election off and then was back to my regular full-time job. So not a huge amount of rest. And,
that's not something that I think about all the time. The effort, just the number of hours of effort people put into things. It's not like they're doing all of this stuff as part of their job, just when DJ said that, I had Sunday and then it was back to work on Monday. It really solidifies though that commitment, this is no small thing, giving up so much of your time and really so much of your heart to run for politics. I don't think that's recognized enough. And it's, just something that became really obvious as we were having this discussion.
We're all driven by different things, like success or winning, and those things are important. But how do you define that? Like getting elected isn't necessarily winning or success. And I, as a campaign manager, you always, manage people's expectations, and that's something that you then try to like translate to yourself as a candidate. It's hard. I expected like to feel like upset or disappointed, and I didn't, because it felt like just a really positive, energizing, engaging, like I feel have really built something that can continue to grow and be built upon, that it really felt like a success. And I was just so proud of everyone who engaged with the campaign, whether that's even just getting to the polls and voting, or volunteering or contributing. It was such a positive feeling at the end of it that it felt like a win. It felt like success.
That's so cool.
It was
such
still
a whirlwind. And I mean, I want to just take a couple more minutes and talk about DJ the woman, because I know I am so obsessed with all of your knowledge politically and with respect to the unions, and I've been geeking out. Thanks for all that. But I also, I know you do roller derby. You have this beautiful little place in Yarrow. Tell me a little bit about who you are. What are your hobbies? You're a stepmom to two gorgeous girls.
Yeah, I think this is a really important thing to talk about when you're doing interviews like this. I hope someone gets to interview you for this thing. really good. But so often when we talk about ourselves and like who we are, it's like listing points on a resume, and that's so not who people are.
Yes.
And like, what is like honor in your heart is a hard thing to articulate in terms of what defines you. And like, you're not defined by your career, your job. Family is incredibly important to me. And that, my two stepdaughters that I have, whom, were like weeks into Carin's campaign and realized that our daughters are best friends and didn't even know.
Yeah.
Like, this is, it's great. And that also is like, community is so important. I've lived in Yarrow for a little over a year now, and I absolutely love Yarrow. We've had already some hard times over the last year.
Flood in the fall.
As a community, but how that community comes together and supports each other, and just how it upholds the values that are important to me in my life, like outdoor activity and family, and just like being together in community. And like what you do in your spare time is really important.
It's a big deal.
Asking people like, or talking about, it's okay to have to tune out and like keep that balance and do something. It's great to talk about people's successes and all the things they're doing. I've been like a chronic volunteer for like my entire life, like to the point where it's it's too much on your plate. So acknowledging that, I think is a helpful message for people to hear. And whether it's, read a book or do a puzzle. I love board games. I'm a big game fan. Make the girls play with me all the time.
Nice.
And I like movies and just sometimes TV shows that you need to turn your brain off and or like have in the background who people are and what they do is a huge part of that. Sports have always been a really large part of my life. That led me to who I am and like how I feel about my community, being a part of a team. It's a really important aspect of that. Roller derby was a fantastic and amazing community to be a part of. That just it's empowering women from many different parts of the community, different ages, different athletic backgrounds, to own something and then like set that direction and carry it out, and like also be an inclusive, supportive space for transgender and non-binary folks, and like that what that sport is doing for community is huge.
Great point.
And
I could not agree more. One of my children is in roller derby. My partner is in roller derby. And it is such a warm, fuzzy, wonderful place to be. I don't play, but they're so good to each other, kind, and so many great skills to be had. It's a wonderful sport.
In addition to it being a very productive outlet for my personality in terms of full contact, high level, competitive, aggressive roller derby with a lot of strategy, simultaneous offense and defense. There's not many sports that you're doing that type of strategy simultaneously. So, an amazing sport.
So cool. And you got like a cool persona and you have all your gear.
I mean, yes, the gear is important. Safety is a full contact sport, but expressing yourself on the track is a part of this, right? And how roller derby has evolved over the years in terms of, theatrics to athleticism, and it always combining like a little bit of a combination of that.
Yep.
To me, it's how you express yourself on the track athletically and like as a person, and what that means.
So cool. I see I just see from you, I see this woman who is literally your actions match your philosophy. Do you know what I mean? Like, what you say is really who you are. And I see you doing this, which is also why I think you are such a great political candidate, but also such a great friend. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes to tell us about you and to talk about your life. I know that, gosh, we will see more of this cat. She's going to be around. Thanks, DJ. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Carin.